aren't here, and my app won't load on my phone, we'll do the check-in
Awesome.
the old-fashioned way.
Just email?
Put your name down.
Okay.
Yeah, because we have you guys by name.
And I'd like to send my deck out after. Can you give me days to send it to this week? Is that?
If you want, yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, if you guys want a copy of the deck, then go ahead and put your email on that and say, you know, yes, I want the deck. We can take up as many pages. I have a whole stack of paper there. Don't have to fit it all on one page. So hi everyone, I'm Bernard. Welcome to our product school discussion for the week. First of all, has anyone here not heard of product school? Everyone's familiar with it? We are, thank you all for coming. We do have our really large Slack channel. I know it says it's 25,000 people, it's probably a lot more than that now. The Slack channel is really good and useful for those who want to be a PM, who are a PM, if you're looking for a job, if you want to find somebody to be a PM for your company. There's a lot of networking that goes on, a lot of kind of random questions. There's various AMAs that go on, and there's a lot of interesting discussions that happen, some of which are germane to being a PM, some of which are just random and not. But the Slack channel is a really great place to go and hang out if you guys want to do so. Particularly, you can also ask people who have gone through one of these programs. If you're curious about it, you can say, hey, what was your experience? I know there's a couple of write-ups that people have done on the programs that they've taken. There's over 10,000 people that have taken courses across 14 different campuses. Includes Canada, UK, and a lot of them are also available online. We'll get into what they are here. The first one is product management. This one is actually taught here in Austin as well. It is an 8-week part-time course, and it's all about how do you be a product manager. One of the cool things about this class is that the conundrum that a lot of you have trying to become one, if you aren't one already, is, well, what have you worked on? Show me your app that you worked on and how many users do you have? How do you answer that question if you've not been a product manager before, if you've never done it? Well, one way is to run a side project and do that. We talked about that last month. Another way is to get into a course like product management where you actually do that. You'll actually come up with an idea, build a product, you'll actually code it, even if you are as incapable as I am in coding. You'll actually do some of that coding work, you'll do some wireframing work, and you'll actually launch an app. Very, very cool. If you want to get a little bit deeper into the technical side, I do recommend some of these other courses that we have. These are our online courses, starting with Coding for Managers. Well, you may not necessarily be the person who codes, unless that happens to be your background. As a product manager, you don't code, but you do need to interact with the people who do code, and you may not be running, telling them exactly what to be doing. As a matter of fact, one of the things that we'll tell you is don't tell them exactly how to code. Let them code. But you need to be able to speak the language. You need to know how long it takes in general to get some kind of code out. If you don't know these things, they can just kind of run over you, and they will. But a large part about being a good product manager is being able to build rapport. And if you can speak the language of the people that you're working with, you'll be able to build much better rapport. One of the other angles is data analytics. Is the product that you're working on using a lot of SQL? Is it very heavy into analyzing data? Or do you have to gather a lot of data to make decisions about your product? Well, you need to, if you haven't done this, this is a really great class to get into for saying, hey, I want to learn about how to handle all this, what can be overwhelming amounts of data, and make sense of it so that we can move forward. If you want to be more on the marketing side, well, there's digital marketing. Once you've launched a product, or even as you launch a product, where are you going to launch it? How are you going to do that? What are you going to do with this stuff? Well, digital marketing is really important, and it changes very quickly. Digital marketing, when I took my MBA, 15 years ago was totally different than what we do today. So you have to kind of stay up on top of all this stuff to be able to speak intelligently and act intelligently as you move forward with launching products. We have 3 other courses here. A UX design class for managers. This is basically going to be talking about prototyping and wireframing, 2 really important skills if you don't already have this. This is also kind of the difference between UI and UX. What is information architecture? What is a user persona? What does usability testing mean? These are all things that go into the design of the interface, and if you naturally have a talent for design, this will be a great place to start. The product leadership class is for experienced product managers if you already have this, but you want to gain some more strategic skills and get a step up on your competitors. Or come to classes like this, for that reason. But this way you can start talking about how to change, or rather how to translate the goals of the organization as a whole, particularly as a company begins to get more mature. It's no longer this mad dash to get one thing out. Now we start having multiple products, and what does the identity of the company look like? What is the company mission? Why are you doing some of these things? Well, if you can translate some of these high-level whys and articulate them to the teams, now we're going to be able to have an organization that's running with a purpose and a mission. Finally, we do actually offer corporate training for large companies, and I've got a list here. We've actually talked to product managers from Deloitte, Salesforce, JP Morgan, Bank of America, and a number of other companies across a lot of different industries. So if you're interested and you work in a large company and you want us to come in and train product managers, kind of get everyone aligned on what it is that we do, then we can do that. But right now I'd like to introduce Brittany Adams from Silvercar.
Thank you. That's my hype squad. That's back there. Those are friends. Thank you. I'm so excited to talk to you guys. So the essence of my presentation is around self-care as a product manager in this role. And what I first want to start out with is getting a sense of, raise your hand for me if you are currently in product management, please. Cool, okay. Raise your hand if you are interested in getting into product management. Cool, okay, good. Then that means there's information that can apply to everyone here. So, a little bit about myself. There's a lot of big pictures of me tonight, it's funny. It's strange. So, I noticed that as I was looking through events here in Austin, I'm originally from San Francisco, that we have a lot of events in the product management community about how to craft a phenomenal resume, how to ace the interview, and then also what responsibilities to expect when you're actually on the job. But what I felt was missing was another layer that if you don't implement can absolutely make being a product manager a struggle, and that is self-care. So my journey to product management was actually through first finding an executive assistant position at my previous company, hotwire.com. I applied through Craigslist 6 years ago when LinkedIn was just becoming cool. And I like highlighting that because something that's constant when you talk to product managers is that their journey into product management is usually anything but a straight line. So I went from being an executive assistant, taking care of other people, which is something I'm traditionally good at, got into a content manager role, and it was in that role that I got to take on some extracurricular projects from which I was given a product manager position. This is my 3rd year as a hybrid product manager and PO. I think there are, how would I put it? There are some companies that are starting to split out these 2 different roles, but in my experience, they've usually been combined. I'm a big fan of personal development and growth in general. From Northern California originally, and I'm the proud mom of a 10-year-old pug. So setting you guys up The topic of self-care has a lot of different meanings. So this could be something such as obviously happy hours after work, nice long vacations, but in the context of this presentation, I wanted to define it as setting yourself up mentally and emotionally to succeed in your role. And the three things that I wanted you guys to take away from today are this idea of thriving instead of surviving and just trying to like figure it out for the first couple years on the job, identifying what a power place is and how you can grow confidence as you're new to the role, and then acquiring tools to navigate difficult conversations which are not out of the ordinary. They should actually be expected when you're managing expectations among your executives. So I'm gonna hop right into chapter 1. So there are a couple of unspoken truths that I wanted to share with you guys about the product manager role, and that is that in addition to your responsibilities that you see on your job description, those of you that are PMs right now can probably relate to this. You're actually at the center of this experience where you have to be creative, you are consistently vulnerable and sharing that there's information you don't know, and then regular uncertainty. And as far as our stakeholders are concerned, we've inherited probably every single one of their to-do lists. There's also this important point to bring up where when I was a content manager, if I did A, I could usually expect to see B happen, and that changes when you step into product management. So you're actually surrounded by a lot of educated guesses. Some have stronger reasoning than other, and we call these hypotheses, but they really are educated guesses. This is a sarcastic slide because you are literally at the center of everybody's, at the center of everybody's crosshairs, and they've got something that they want you to build for them. So 3 years ago, when I was at Hotwire, and a lot of what really contributed to me wanting to talk about this topic, so I was straight out of content. I was so excited to take on something new, and I did not have the strongest teachers. So you might come across something when you get into product management where it's a staple for us to say that we understand Agile, and it's something that every recruiter asks for, it's something every job description lists, but it turns out that actually understanding Agile, it's easy to mess it up. So I was learning from teachers who told me, yes, we're great at this, but what I was actually doing was just trying to figure it out because they weren't the best at it. So this 440-page book was dropped on my desk. Who here has read this book out of curiosity? Okay, good. Then I am among good company. I did not read it. I got through 5 pages. I was like, this cannot be what this role is all about. My God. And so I also discovered that coming out of content management into this realm of where people are all asking you for something and you have to prioritize, I still have it, I'm working on it, but at the time I had a really severe disease to please. So if I was approached by a stakeholder and I didn't have strong reasoning as to why I would say no to something, I panicked. And that's not out of the ordinary. That is totally typical when you're starting out in this role. And because these teachers weren't necessarily the best, I didn't know what best practices to look for. I just knew that things felt off. Has anybody here ever had a 30-minute stand-up? Yeah, that is not a stand-up. Or meetings where the developers are sitting down during stand-up. It's like pulling teeth to get a status update. You just think there's gotta be a better way for this to work. And so, as I was new and often panicking and afraid to speak to stakeholders and trying to figure out this role, I just got really honest one day with one of my colleagues in the kitchen at Hotwire, who was an older product manager with a few more years of experience. And I was like, Paul, do you worry that you will get fired if you ever make the wrong decision? And he legitimately laughed, and he took a breath, and he's like, every day, Brittany. I was like, holy shit. And so the fact that that enters our mind is something that should not be skipped over. It's something that we should sit with for a little bit. You are not going to be doing anywhere near your best work if you're afraid that by making a decision that doesn't work out, you're going to get fired. This conversation was a funny one, and since then I've had several conversations with managers during times in which I felt concerned that it looked like I wasn't making the best decision, but when you verbalize that, your manager is there to support you. You should not get fired for making a decision based off an educated guess that didn't go right. And if we fast forward to 9 months ago, this is starting to lead into my first tip when it comes to thriving. So I took the CSPO certification. Is there anybody in here who's taken any Scrum Alliance certifications? Okay, that means there's plenty of you who could. So this was huge for me, and the reason that it's the reason my first tip is learning from the experts. This may sound funny because you would think that perhaps sometimes your managers are the experts. However, because we work in an industry where everybody says, like, I know Agile, I understand Scrum, my first tip is to go learn from a company or an agency that is specifically there to teach you how to do this well. They don't have anything else that's motivating them. They want you to do it well for your company. So the first recommendation would be going to actually get your certification. Hi, guys. No problem.
Yes, I want to find out what my sign-up is. And get the new, I want to find out where the sign-up sheet is if I get the new people.
Where's the sign-up sheet, y'all?
Keep it
Can we
moving.
pass it up?
For those
Thank
who
you.
haven't signed in, go ahead and sign in.
Awesome.
Put your email on that if you want a
They just
copy of the
keep coming.
presentation.
I love them.
We need to get it smaller too. It's 25 megs.
The list?
The presentation.
Wait, 5 minutes?
Megs.
Oh, sorry, that's all me.
We'll shrink it.
Yes, okay, so when it comes to the certification, books, articles, webinars, hallway conversations, they complement that, they do not replace it. So, first tip, feeling around, trying to figure it out, being uncertain, that's surviving. Learning from the people that are there to actually teach you, that is thriving. My second tip, so as you get into your first year on the roll, or if you're in the early beginning trying to navigate it, when you're first starting out as a product manager, you're going to have this experience where your first failure or your first negative experience might feel like the end of the world. My first software release, there were bugs in it, and I completely freaked out. But the reason this happens is because as you're starting out, you don't have any relative experience in the role to compare it to. So, you know, a feature that may not be bringing in customers, a bug that might be keeping people from signing up, you don't have 100 other experiences as a PM to compare these things to. So, when you are panicking at 9 o'clock in the morning and don't know what to do, just take a breath, pause, and think about why you took on this role in the first place. It's not going to be perfect in the beginning, it might be messy, but it's really valuable to just sit there and think about, okay, how does this serve me at a higher level? And some of the questions that I have asked myself through interactions with challenging developers, stakeholders that just weren't interested in anything but a timeline and a deadline and a due date. I was like, oh my God. These are some of those questions that have really stuck with me, especially what lesson can this role teach you about people? Hint, a lot. what can it teach you about team dynamics, business, and just life itself? All right, my third tip. Prioritization is not a science, it is an art. Besides having eggs in both of these photos, which I actually didn't do on purpose, can you guys tell me what is the difference between both of them? First thing that comes to mind.
Utensils?
Yes. Are they different utensils?
Yeah.
Nice, okay. I was hoping that would be catchy. Cool. So the reason that I put chopsticks versus a fork and knife is that, let's say you prioritize a problem. This is proof that there are different solutions to solve the same problem. So when you prioritize something, you're prioritizing based off of hypotheses, which I had spoken to a little bit before, but the solutions that you come up with, it's really a team sport. So you might have ideas as to how you would like something handled, and you can pass those ideas on to your designers and your developers. But the art really kicks in when you're required to collaborate with other people to push something forward. So remember that although you might have an idea, no matter what, it's going to evolve and shift and change as people work on it to deliver a solution. And that's not a bad thing. That's something that we should accept. All right, one of my favorite ones, be seen at work. So Carla Harris, she is a vice chairman at Morgan Stanley on Wall Street. She's just also a general badass. She's a big author. She has something called Carla's Pearls of Wisdom. She always wears a pearl necklace. And she has an awesome quote, and this quote is, "Keeping your head down will not keep you from getting shot. So you might as well keep your head up to see the bullet coming." And this is something that resonates with me because as a person who gets very comfortable sitting at my desk and using email or slacking someone to ask them something, there are moments where if you have a question or a 1 or 2 line email you want to send, it is so worth it just walking over to the person's desk and speaking to them in person. I'm not saying to obsessively do this and make it like uncomfortable for yourself, because obviously we have tools available to communicate, but think about like when was the last time that you actually spoke face to face with a particular stakeholder, and just make time for that. It takes 1 to 2 minutes, and that actually builds a rapport that is really valuable. My fifth tip for you guys. So this may sound standard, but I have found that when I stepped into product management, coming from a UX space and being a content manager, I immediately assumed that all of my developers, my fellow product managers, the stakeholders around me, they knew more about what was going on than I did. So I think that that is surviving in an organization because it allows you to not share what you know. Thriving is actually assuming that everyone around you knows a fraction of what's going on. So when people are going to act like they know what's going on within teams, like they have all the information, but really just volunteer info. And especially, don't sell short what you gained from your previous roles. So you were in those roles for a reason, you were promoted for a reason. Bring that context to the table, because when you don't, it's just lost experience that they could all learn from. All right, who here knows what the HIPPO acronym stands for? You know it. Okay, highest paid person's opinion. I was trying to find a good hippo picture for this slide, but some of them were like terrifying, so kept those out. But I have found that the real like gritty, time-consuming, emotionally exhausting challenges that come with product management have come from working with just out of this world personalities. So you're surrounded by loud voices, egos, but also a lot of experience, people who are very passionate about their particular department. And there may be times where you fold. And instead of being like angry with yourself, it's an opportunity to reflect and think about how you could do it differently next time. So if you ask yourself, did I act from a place of integrity? So did I do what I fundamentally believed was the right thing to do? Did I take the path that felt right? Those, like, you can't replace that. And there's going to be experiences, I think, for everyone in which you may not feel like you've acted from integrity, but you can always come back to it, just one experience at a time. Okay, this is a dorky one because I love writing. So my 7th tip for you guys is to start a product management journal. In my first year as a product manager, I was learning alongside a fellow PM who had a senior title and had been doing it for several years. And he told me one day, he said, Brittany, some days, like at the end of a year, you're going to look back and there will be some years where you ask yourself, what did I actually do? And my immediate response to that was, what? What do you mean, what you did? Like, huh? So, because I don't ever want to have a year where I look back and think, oh my gosh, I can't remember what I accomplished, like what did I actually contribute? First of all, I think the answer is BS. You will absolutely contribute things throughout your year. But this is also something that serves as a nice pat on the back and reinforcement when you're having challenging times with the team or with stakeholders. So I do it on a quarterly basis. It's something I recommend. Whether you write it or whether you type it in Google Drive, just capture a couple of bullet points as to what you were proud of and what things you got to deliver, because it's a feel-good thing. This is a real-life example. So I used Google Drive for my first several quarters at Silvercar. Just to give you guys some examples of what I was feeling, I was spearheading the rewrite of a 6-year-old internal app, something I'd never done before. I'd only worked on features. Drove research in the field and had a great time with concierges getting their feedback. We created processes that didn't exist before because prioritization was just throwing something over the fence. We built our first roadmap. I felt really valuable at this time, and then it was also the best month all time for the company. All right, and then this one, so this is something that is, I guess, like, how would I put it? Asking for help is hard. So this is a tip where there are multiple times that I had other product managers speak to me about, like, just reach out and talk to another Scrum team. Look for the habits that you want to adopt, look for the habits that you don't, but just spend time meeting with them. And you have to get comfortable with acknowledging, like, you don't have it figured out, to actually go and meet with these people and just observe. Some of the best things I learned that I don't want to do came from other Scrum teams. Learning what a proper stand-up was, aka not 30 minutes and like done in 5. That was something I witnessed where I was like, wow, these are how the other teams operate. So just get the opportunity to go observe and learn from other folks. All right, my 9th tip for you guys. So something that I have always been a little bit annoyed by is the fact that as product managers and development teams, we always talk about sprints. And I laugh like every year when we get to like sprint 25 or 26, because life is just not a series of consistent sprints. But this is something that I find funny because we are constantly sprinting to something. So something I wanted to impart on people listening today is that although we speak in sprints, however long your sprints may be, product management is really an endurance sport. As I had said earlier, the more experience you have in product management, I would say the less severe your highs and lows get. But in the beginning, when you start out, you're just going to be having to navigate through the uncertainty of like bugs being released, failed features. Don't worry about it. And endurance sports aren't always, because when I think of endurance sports, I'm kind of like, oh, that's a lot. Endurance sports aren't always like climbing up 2,000 feet in elevation or, trying to run an Ironman for like 400 miles. It is something that also has smooth, nice, beautiful, serene moments too. And it's in this endurance sport of product management and in the consistency of those sprints that finding your rhythm is something that you can actually feel. So this was something I was excited to actually just start experiencing probably 6 months ago. So what I noticed here is that I had taken the CSPO training, which was incredibly helpful. I was getting into a groove with my team, and alongside the Scrum rituals that we have, it was really also finding the right pace at which to meet with the designer, to meet with the stakeholder, and you just start to get into this groove that feels good. And once you actually get to notice it, it's going to be exciting for you to keep going and experiencing it. All right, talking about your power place and growing confidence. Power place is one of my favorite terms. I love it. Okay, so this section, there is a secret ingredient to this recipe of identifying one's power place, of growing more confident. Can anybody guess what this one ingredient, does anybody want to guess what this one ingredient might be?
Self-care.
There's self-care, good job. I didn't think of that one. So, to get there, you can't cheat it. You guys are probably gonna hate me for this. It's time. So, this is one where, yes, self-care is a part of it. I like what you did there. Thank you very much. You guys, when I was getting promoted at Hotwire and I had just gotten into product management, I remember a couple of weeks as a PM, I was telling myself, in a year, I'm gonna be a senior PM. And then after that, who knows what's going to happen? And I wasn't aware of just how many different kinds of experiences you can get week after week and month after month in the role. So I was totally faking it until I made it. And it turns out with the more experiences I've had as a product manager, the more relaxed I've become. If something difficult happens and you need to address it, it's a conversation. It's not a crisis. And that's something that comes with actually having one experience after the other. And this concept of identifying your power place. So I recommend that you sit down and spend the time to just answer a couple of questions, because if you don't take the time to sit with yourself and identify these following things, then you're going to be at a disadvantage, I think, as you navigate through the product management role. So taking just some time to sit down and write out answers to these following questions are going to be really beneficial. So the first one, what do you enjoy doing? There are 1,000 different flavors of product management. I have spoken with plenty of recruiters who say that we're hiring for this role, and you can tell in the way they speak to you, they have no idea what you're here to do. And they don't understand that this is just a full spectrum of different opportunities all within one title. So what do you actually enjoy doing? For me personally, I love driving user research. I could get better at pulling my own analytics. I don't give two craps about like data tables and data warehouses, and I would love to just have a product analyst for the rest of my life to like be my partner in crime. That is not my forte. What comes naturally to you? That's another one. So for me, what I feel comes naturally to me is engaging with the team, connecting them to a larger vision, explaining the value behind the stories that they're going to be working on, breaking stories down, reviewing items with our QA team and finding defects. Those things come easy. And then while those anchor you in a place of power and confidence about what you just like, what is on the other side of that are these things. So what do you not enjoy doing? I don't enjoy analytics. It's something I need to do as a part of my job. It's something I could get better at. It's not my favorite thing. This may be taboo, but I also don't always enjoy engaging with executives. Sometimes I lean towards working with my Scrum team and middle management and just jiving with them. And then what doesn't come naturally to you? I don't think I will ever have the makings of a software developer in me, but that's why I get to work with awesome people that make up that team. And so when you answer all four of these questions, what you're identifying is just what you enjoy and what feels good within your role. And then you know, okay, so stepping out into a new opportunity to run analytics, or a new opportunity to draft up a contract for what an API endpoint might look like. You are aware of what is within your power place and what is not. So that just makes you powerful regardless, because you can actually step out into new opportunities to learn things while remaining confident that you're good at some particular things, those are what you love, and you can take risks. All right, so my recipe for confidence that I've experienced is acting from my power place of what I enjoy, what I'm naturally good at, and then purposefully stepping outside of that into areas where I know these aren't my strengths, adding that to new experiences and just doing it over and over and over again. That's what builds confidence. And ultimately, it's gonna take time. Who here loves having difficult conversations? Yes. I hope you're good at it, because you could give me some tips. Okay, so difficult conversations, such a topic. These are the norm in product management, and something that as many tools as you go through, they're going to keep happening to you. Before I talk to you guys about some tips as to how to handle them, I do want to again segue to the disease to please. And it's something that, I mean, if any of you guys don't have it, I would love to learn from you. But I absolutely grew up like being a yes woman, and that was something very comfortable to me. Sometimes today I still find myself, as someone's talking to me and I disagree with them, nodding my head, like just to make sure that they're comfortable. I'm like, wait, no, I think we should do this completely differently. And this, again, ties into experience after experience, one after another, just practicing being honest. If you have a manager that you don't feel comfortable disagreeing with, I immediately recommend you go to HR to talk about that. They're not just there for hiring and firing, they're there to actually be a resource for you. But really, conversation by conversation, just practicing being able to say, no, I disagree with you, I'm acting from a place of integrity. This is something that you can definitely overcome. My 11th tip for you guys. So I'm gonna talk about some insane quotes that are real life quotes. So I've had these experiences so that hopefully you don't have to. The first quote being, a developer that told me last year, I don't need to read the acceptance criteria. Shock, did not know how to respond to that one. And then another developer on my team who said several times in front of the broader group, if you want me to work on that, I'll just quit, go somewhere else, and make $50,000. So these statements I hadn't heard before. And if they happen to you, the one thing that I regret is how long it took me. I spoke to my manager and I spoke to the manager of these developers early on, but I was frustrated with myself because of how long it took me to go to human resources. And this is something where if you're feeling it out, figuring it out and just trying to feel around as to like, perhaps this is how this company operates. Perhaps I'm the odd one out and this is how the team dynamic is. Nuh-uh. This is not a healthy team dynamic and you do not need to hang around it. So my tip here is that you're not an army of one and you actually have to repeatedly bring these interactions to light. I stomached them for months and that's what led to a very poor self-care experience. So don't do that to yourself. Just rally the troops, get other people involved, get their perspective, and let them guide you to make the best decision for yourself. This is one of my, yeah, go ahead.
What if there is no HR? Who would you have spoken to?
Ooh. That is a phenomenal question. There's no like chief administrative officer or office manager.
There's no, person that oversees that kind of thing.
Wow. That's startup. It's a phenomenal question. Didn't even think of that. So, sorry.
I was just gonna say, I sort of was thinking the same, because I've been there too, where like I wish I could have gone to an HR person, but like, the HR, or the main executive is also like the technical, is everything, so it's like, it is a pretty like precarious situation you find yourself in, where you're like, what do I do,
Wow. So,
That's more of an early stuff, like stage.
I joined Silvercar at like 50 employees, so we had an HR. But what I could have done, I was also just so frustrated that I didn't do it. If you can go, so the employees that were very challenging to have on a team, I went to their manager, and these developers were very talented, so I felt like no action was being taken. I would recommend going to their manager's manager if that's an option. I went to HR because they had mentioned I was beyond the point of frustration. I was ready to say, please help. And then I would also, if you have friends that you, friends in another company that you trust, or if you know someone that within HR, like even asking them out to coffee about a scenario that you don't know how to handle, I would turn to someone outside of your business if you can to still get perspective on the problem. Because although it may not be there, they can still give you that. Yeah.
I would also suggest putting your complaint in writing, because even if it's landing upon deaf ears, having it documented still counts for something.
I completely agree. We had, in this particular instance, we had a lot of employees interviewed about like different experiences to get different angles from the situation, but our director of HR had drafted something. I would totally recommend that you keep it like in your email or someplace else where you can just keep a record of what's going on. Thank you. My next tip for you guys, this has saved me a couple of times from some really, in some really challenging moments. I now ask every stakeholder at the start of a new project, what is your definition of success? So, before I was doing this, I was having group interviews with stakeholders to gather requirements to better understand a project, and then we would get halfway through the project and find out that something wasn't coming along in the way that they had expected. So asking someone at the very beginning, just take 10 to 15 minutes per stakeholder in whatever project you're taking on and ask them, how do you define success for this feature? Or how do you define success for this suite of features? And this became really helpful. So in Q4, Silvercar by Audi was acquired by Audi about 2 years ago. We have a lot of stakeholders in Germany. And I was in a position where I was going to lead a hybrid team of some folks in-house and some contractors. And our German stakeholders were looking for 2 features in a product. Let me put it that way. 2 features in a product to be delivered within 12 weeks. And so I had a feeling in my stomach that these 12 weeks were not, like this amount of work within 12 weeks was not going to be possible. And that's when I ran this exercise. So what I've actually listed out here are all of the actual definitions of success that I received from our different stakeholders. The first one being the general manager of my business unit, who is also from Germany. We're gonna deliver all 3 features within 12 weeks. Like we got a 12-week timeline. We've given you 3 features. These 3 features are like 3 words each on a whiteboard. This is what you're going to deliver. Our operations stakeholder, if we get even 80% of all 3 done, we'll be in a great place. Does 80% of all 3 sound agile to you guys? I sat with him, I was like, oh, okay, I'll get back to you. Our engineering team, so my engineering manager and a couple of others were actually here to guide these contract developers into working with our process. And the engineering team said, and this was a fun one, we will successfully deliver at least 1 of the requested features within 12 weeks. So this team was not asked to give an estimate in terms of timing. Our VP of engineering was, so there was a big miscommunication there. And then our very happy, excited stakeholders in Germany said that we will implement all 3 features and market feedback will be positive. Do you guys think that we implemented all 3 features? No, definitely not. We actually got to implement 2 out of 3. And so in the beginning, 1 week before this 12-week period begins, I put each definition on a slide and I gather the group that I had interviewed into the room and I say, okay, we need to talk about the discrepancies here. And while I was the facilitator, it totally led to a very uncomfortable conversation amongst the executives that were involved because decisions had been made and numbers had been given without the subject matter experts, our developers, actually offering the timeline. This turned out to have a happy ending though, so.
Did you have that conversation at the tail end of the 12 weeks or at the beginning?
This one? This was 1 week before the 12 weeks officially kicked off.
And then when you brought everyone in on the discrepancies, it was closer to the deadline?
Oh no, the discrepancies was a week before the project started. Good clarification. So we had this 1 week before this entire initiative kicks off, and then what happened was I was providing weekly updates to our stakeholders in Germany to let them know of the status of things. And we met again at the 6-week mark to say, look, here is the pace at which we've been able to build things, here's what we've developed, here's what your options are for the next 6 weeks. None of them included feature number 3, excuse me. And when we got to the end of these 12 weeks, like the silver lining in all of this was that since we'd been communicating so consistently and being so transparent with these stakeholders in Germany, by week 12 they were like, it's fine, it happens. We'll take 2 out of 3. I was like, are you kidding me? All of the panic over this? So really, like the most painful conversation was the one in the beginning because the expectations were misaligned. But I have had some positive experiences where if you consistently update people, They really just want exposure to how things are coming along. And if something can't be completed, show them the trade-offs. Don't just tell them it's not going to happen, because nobody wants to hear that, but give them options. I might need more than 2 bottles of water, you guys. This one, tip number 13. So I think you guys can imagine, but with quotes from the developers that I had previously shown, my decisions were challenged a lot. And challenging decisions are not bad at all, whatsoever. The issue is that when you have an experience with someone who doesn't like how you did something, I like to ask them 2 questions. So the first question is, what do you disagree with about how this was handled? Like, they'll lay it on you. You didn't do this right. We could have had this release at this time. Like, why are there so many bugs for QA to handle? How come I have to read the acceptance criteria in the ticket? Blah, blah, blah. All this stuff. They'll lengthy list. Totally happens. But question number 2, what would you have done differently? So, how many people do you think, which question do you think people always have an answer to?
2. Minus 1.
Number 1. Yeah. Everyone has an answer to question number 1. If you work with people that have answers to number 2, right on. So people that actually respond with what they would have done differently, those people I think are good to keep around and listen to, as long as they're doing it in a respectable way. People that challenge you and can offer alternatives, those are the people that are going to help you grow. People that are going to complain and let you know what didn't work and that they can't, like, they don't enjoy reading anything. Like, you can offer an ear, but don't continue to take their feedback. Listen to the people that give you answers to question number 2. Okay, this one is like, the next one is a classic self-care slide, so don't hate me for this, you guys, because it's so true. So I have had several interactions with stakeholders and poor timelines and deadlines coming up, in which I ended one day with all of these crazy interactions. I didn't have a solution or a response to give to folks. I asked if we could meet up the following day to discuss it. I am a huge advocate for 8 hours of sleep. I get it as often as I can. And when you're new to the role, it's like learning a new language. So if you are in a whole new environment, you're picking up new skills, you're learning to speak in terms of software development, in terms of design. This stuff doesn't have to come easy to you from day one. You need to let yourself rest. When I was in college, I studied Italian and I got to go live abroad. And I remember like the first few weeks living up in northern Italy in Bologna, I was in bed by 7 or 8 o'clock because you're just overwhelmed with all the information that's coming in. So let yourself rest. I've woken up with some mornings and I've actually had solutions to problems that were new that I could bring to the team. So it's a secret magic trick. I highly suggest you guys sleep on it. All right, my last tip for you guys, tip number 15. This is something where through the difficult interactions with developers, the extremely crunched timeline, and foreign stakeholders, when you have these experiences, this can be one that's hard to remember when you're in the thick of it, but when I look back at Hotwire, if I pause conveniently with this presentation and look at what I've done with Silvercar, there's one question that you need to ask yourself. And when you're stressing out about what you haven't learned, what you haven't delivered, what you haven't done well, this question is something I recommend you all fall back on. And what that question is did you leave it better than you found it? When you stepped in, and when you contributed your work, and when you moved to a new team, when you left the company, did you leave it better than you found it? Because ultimately, that's just the job. Like, come in, contribute, do great things, and leave it better than you found it. And that's it, you guys. Thank you. Are there any questions? We had some good questions throughout the presentation. Yeah.
So you were talking about 12 weeks deadline. So if everyone forced the developers to finish 3 features, but it was not QA or there was no qualification done, and you were at the end of 12 weeks, would you still release all 3 features?
So if I didn't, the question was if I didn't have like a QA engineer available and they developed something.
Probably there was no time because all 3 features were to be done, but you did not have any qualification done. It was not tested at all. But then you had the 3 features ready. Would you release them?
So I would look for ways to QA throughout. I would QA myself if we didn't have anybody to QA throughout the process. And this is, I think with our agency experience, we pulled in developers and we taught them this is how we work in terms of Scrum. You'll join our sprints, you'll attend our sprint rituals, and that meant that every 2 weeks, everything they worked on was getting tested and reviewed and then released a piece at a time. So I would advocate when you're working with an agency, my core answer to your question is no, I would not release it. That's the core answer. But I would, on top of that, look to create a process in which that is tested along the way, because if it's built without any testing, that isn't agile. So that is the advice that I would give. Yeah.
I was curious, then in that situation of like needing to talk to HR and like had nobody, how did that help alleviate your stress, I guess, of that situation? Like, what did they do for you, or what did they bring? How did they help you out?
What did they do?
Yeah.
That's a great question. So what does HR do? No, I'm teasing. So I totally have the tendency to internalize things and mull them over in my head multiple times before actually sharing with someone or asking for help. You're like that? Okay, cool, right on. So the biggest immediate benefit that left me thinking, my God, why didn't you do this sooner, that I got from going to HR was sitting across from someone and having them say, you're not crazy, this is not acceptable. Like, this is not how we treat each other. And the issue was that they had no exposure to that because we were all just trying to be like, God, this developer's being such an asshole. Like, did you try to talk to him? Yeah. Did you try to talk to him? Yeah. So the first thing was an acknowledgement that my feelings were absolutely validated. The second thing that, of course, came with this person in HR was them saying that, like, she asked me, do you want us to take action on this? And I said, yes. So someone gave me the opportunity and put me back in a place of power in which I could say, yeah, if this isn't how we treat each other, I do want you to talk to other people about their experience, and I do want you to make a decision about these employees. So those would be the 2 things that I really got from that.
Nice. Thanks.
Yeah, go ahead.
Working with the contractors, international contractors, like, how did you get them to understand, like, the internal, like, the process that you had at Audi in terms of making them buy into, like, the Scrum and being involved and giving feedback, while actually following the process that you had designed?
Great question. So this company, Dialexa in Dallas, as a software development agency, they absolutely have their own processes that they typically go through because most often, sorry guys, they're working with people who have an idea on the back of a napkin, and that's it. We had partnered with them for half of 2018 on another product they were building, and in the retrospective, our team, the other team, shared with the Dialexa folks, like, look, we need to have a project manager or a product manager overseeing the actual agency employees because we had no idea what they're working on. So a part of it was they got reprimanded and they learned like, hey, this kind of working style wasn't working for our clients. But then we got a completely different team of developers and designers than had been on this other project. And so I think what I experienced in speaking with the agency folks was I didn't come in demanding how things be, the way in which things be done, but I came in and I said, we have a way that works for us. We are all either CSPO certified or Scrum Master certified, and we would like to fold you guys into our process because we know that this delivers results for our company. And they were really receptive to that. So didn't like overtake the conversation, but coming in with that confidence about what works over time, we used that to guide the conversation, and they were like, let's do sprints and let's do Scrum. Yeah, go ahead.
Earlier on, you mentioned about one of the things you like or that comes naturally to you is around user research and user experience work. Did you have a prior background in that before doing that in this role, or how did you gain that experience?
Great question. So I did not have direct experience in that before getting this role. As a content manager that sat in UX at Silvercar, at Hotwire, my previous company, Hotwire did have a labs and research team, and I had some friends on that team. So I got to look over the shoulders of what people were doing and ask questions. That said, those methodologies flew out the window when I left Hotwire and came to Austin to work here. So when I talk about user research as a strength or a talent, I'm really basing that on I am interested in asking users questions and better understanding their behavior. So I have done that with concierges that help our customers get into the car through Google Forms. I've used SurveyMonkey with customers in our database. It's really about like, are you interested in understanding how someone is thinking and working? And that is where I've pulled that from. Yeah.
If I could just ask a quick follow-up to that, how did you get the buy-in from your management on allowing you to do that despite not having prior experience?
Yeah, so I am in a company where, first of all, I honestly took the initiative where I was like, let me show you what customers are thinking. And I looked for when executives were asking questions, which they've done multiple times, and they're debating amongst themselves. Honest to God, I quietly went over and created a survey in SurveyMonkey, and then I came back with the results. So I would highly recommend that you find a little something to do yourself, and then seek the opportunity to share that, and I think you'll watch people's eyes light up. Yeah.
Was the agency, were those developers remote?
Yes, they were in Dallas.
So any tips on going through these processes, communicating with your engineering team, with the remote team versus the people you had in Austin, and then the fact that it was a hybrid, right? Like some people in front of you and some people away.
Yeah, so given that my hybrid team consisted of some of the challenging developers here in Austin, some of my internal developers spoke less on Slack than the external people did in Dallas. The question was about like strategies for communicating between them, correct?
For remote, yeah.
For remote, okay.
Just handling remote, and then if there's anything that adds to there's people here and there's remote, if that adds complexity to it, but apparently.
Yeah, so two things that I would default to. I mean, this first one, when I first joined Silvercar, they didn't use video on any of their like Zoom meetings. I was like, we gotta fix this right now. That's a small one, but it also works wonders. Second, really like through traditional channels like Slack, when you're working with a remote team, I highly recommend you do not wait for them to send you information, but you poke and you prod and you ask, hey, these stories are in progress, what's the status update? And then traveling to Dallas a couple of times was also a benefit, but we really relied on Zoom with video conferencing, and then pushing via Slack. Yeah, the traditional stuff. Yeah, go ahead.
When you had that
Yeah, so the meeting before the start of this project consisted of those executives sharing out and me sharing out their different slides, which led to like the big tough conversations. A step before that, I shared what I had compiled with my immediate engineering and product leadership team. So I had reinforcement. I wasn't going in there and like panicking everyone, but my team actually knew what was going to come of this conversation. And then, you know, sitting in there silently as the execs had to have this conversation, really, I circled back a few days later with my manager, who was a part of this, and what I mentioned is like, we're just gonna go ahead. Like, the whole point is that they've become aware of what might happen, but they had paid the money, they wanted the features, let's see what you can do. And I think understandably as stakeholders, they applied a lot of pressure in the beginning, but thankfully it still turned out to be good in the end. Yeah.
So seeing as how stakeholders can have differing opinions of what's valuable and what success looks like, how do you define MVP and success within a product?
Ooh, this is good. So I think I vary it based off of my stakeholders. So with stakeholders that are not opinionated, I definitely take a more of a leading stance in saying like, here's what we've thought up, let me know if you have any feedback, and those stakeholders are usually like, okay, looks good, if you've done the research, all right. For more opinionated stakeholders, what I definitely like to be armed with are different options. And then we have we've created the principle that while executives and stakeholders may have feedback, that we would still, if it's gonna take time to actually implement, we'd still like to move forward with the feature and then circle back with possible design improvements. So I do vary it based on how opinionated the stakeholder is gonna be. Yeah.
You talked a little bit about, in the beginning, about this kind of concept of the PM, PO hybrid role. Can you talk a little bit about your experience of that versus, you know, having a designated like business analyst type role who like gets, you know, test case level requirements and so on?
So I have actually never worked with a business analyst. So I'm sorry to have probably such a boring answer. But yeah, I've worked as a product manager in title that has been a hybrid of the PM working with stakeholders, doing research and prioritizing, and that product owner sitting with the Scrum team, creating the stories and managing them day to day. So I know people have talked about business analysts, but I haven't gotten the pleasure to work with them yet. Sorry.
Sure.
Yes.
In your experience, I know you're talking about Scrum, but on the over kind of high level, is there really a difference between that and release management? I know you talked about like having multiple roles, a PM that does this, but like does that relate to a release manager, or like, you know, let's say in a smaller startup that has multiple roles? Just kind of understand where they maybe relate, or where, you know, things might match, cross over.
So it's about similarities or differences between like Scrum and sprints versus release management?
Yeah.
Okay. That's a good question. I feel like I need to know more about your release management. Because for us, so I'll share what I have and you let me know if this answers your question. So for us, our releases are not tied to like any given dates within our sprints. So what is within those sprints is the work that we plan on completing. So we don't have a release manager. Release management for us is, okay, we've completed these several stories. Are we ready to release them together, or do we need to wait? And then the team is communicating in a releases channel on Slack when we're actually sending those out, and then we communicate to stakeholders. So did that answer your question? I'm not quite sure.
Kinda. I mean, the way I see it, I think that they are related, but just like I said, like with different companies, they split up roles and different things, so just trying to understand.
Do Do you have someone that's specifically coordinating releases, like as their role? Is that what?
No, I mean, this is more in the sense of understanding stakeholders' expectation, and kind of one of the expectations of the stakeholder is kind of a release manager, but like the CPO wants a Scrum Master, and just kind of that disconnect between kind of the two stakeholders.
Okay. Yeah, I haven't worked with a release manager either. So, our stakeholders, what we're usually doing is we're giving a weekly status update in a stakeholder meeting. So this is outside of our Scrum rituals. And we let them know what is finished or what's upcoming. And so thankfully for our stakeholders, when they see that and they know, okay, within a couple days to a week, I can expect a release, they're not pushing beyond that. We then communicate when it's actually released to them. Okay. Yeah.
During this B becomes 2 exercise that you went through, was there a set of decisions that you had to make to prioritize which 2 would make it to the market? Which one didn't? How did you do that?
Was there? Yes. So this was actually the experience with the stakeholders overall for me was a positive one because these were the first stakeholders I had worked with. They were German, in which they said, here are 3 things we want. You help us understand the order in which you can achieve them. Internal stakeholders at Silvercar, some very opinionated ones, we've historically gave them too much of a heavy hand in prioritization, and we're practicing taking that away from them so that we can use more user research to explain like why we're releasing what we're releasing. So what happened was these 3 features, I had asked the stakeholders in Germany, which one of these is of the most value to you? Of course, it was the biggest. And so what I did with my engineering manager and my Scrum Master is we took these 3 features and we talked about, okay, which ones of these are, which is the least difficult, which is the most complex, which one has the potential for the most risk, and given the deadline, we organized them by the smallest level of effort to the largest. And it turned out that this 3rd item, which would have been an entirely new product in a new market, would have taken 12 weeks on its own to actually build. And so at the halfway point of this partnership, we shared what we knew to be true at week 1 versus what we knew to be true at week 6. And that brought to light all of the changes that had happened and was really helpful in actually managing their expectations.
So what you're saying is by week 6, you pretty much killed off number 3?
Yeah, gently though, with lots of kindness. They were still hopeful, and I understood that, but we said, look, we have several more weeks. We can look to optimize what we already plan on implementing, or we can end early. What do you guys? Or we can extend the contract with the agency. So we optimized the 2 features that we had already been working on. Yeah, go ahead.
Do you have any tips or tricks on how to build culture within remote teams?
Ooh, how to build culture within remote teams. Yes. Okay. So, this worked with I did this with Dialexa, but it was also very organic. So I am the kind of person who purposefully looks for people that aren't speaking in meetings and asks them to contribute. I'm the one that purposefully sends goofy GIFs or puts something up on the screen to make people laugh at the start of a sprint ritual. So I would recommend looking for things like, first of all, initiate it. That's the first tip. But I recommend looking for things that you think will create good energy, get people to laugh. That's how you can create positive culture. But then also, when working with a remote team, if somebody remote were to say, I don't read the acceptance criteria, you need to be able to start practicing saying out loud in front of the group that that's not how this team operates and we do things differently. So those are the pieces of advice that I would give. A lot of gifts. I like gifts. That's what I use. Anything else, you guys? Cool. Okay, I've asked that I can send this deck out to any of you, so if you guys give me your email, I'll make sure to send it.
If I
Haha.
have it and you still want that deck, let me know.
Perfect. Because, like, the presentation, one thing, however, books and the websites that I highly recommend are really good ones to read. They're not dense, they're enjoyable, they have great personality, and there's some resources that I continue to go back to. So, highly recommend it for these guys. Okay,
All right, I got a couple
well, I'll hand it
questions.
back over to you.
Yes. Our next event will be held here, March 27th. It will be how to build an enterprise AI product. This will be a real interesting one because everyone talks about AI, but not very many people actually know what it's all about.
It's like Agile.
Exactly. If you want to know more about the next set of courses that are coming up, please visit the website. The next product school product manager class that's going to be held here in town. It's actually over at down the road over at GA. Will be held here from April to June, some 6:30 to 9:30. There are 7 spots left. The one that started just recently was completely full. We do actually have the ability for more people to join in as organizers. If you join as an organizer, you can actually receive a free course valued around $3,000 some odd dollars. So why don't you, if you're interested, drop me a note, and we'll get you signed up on doing that. If there are any other questions, stick around. If not, thank you very much for your time, and we'll see you guys next month. Responsibility is being here, organized. The rooms aren't always set up like this. We need to make sure everything's organized.
Okay.
Once a month.
I could be the other.
We were looking at doing it more often, which is why we want more organizers. Because I can do once a month. I do martial arts, and tonight's my class.
Wow. That's
Yeah.
amazing.
I do South Austin.
I would ask my time for each location.
It's down by the Burleson Road near Howdy Honda.
Oh, martial arts. Okay,
There's a kung fu school there.
okay.
So look for South Austin Kung Fu.
So you're in that camp as well.
Thank you.
Like, do you have it available, or they're just not turning it on?
I'm just responding to your,
Yeah.
When you said that,
what you just said about organizing.
That's a huge thing, because then you can
What's
see
the
people,
best
like,
way
I
to
had some
send
great
you-
colleagues and managers that call people out.
Bernard.
And it's silly because you know if they're not listening, like jokingly,
At Gmail.
say something about it, but it also gets people seeing like who's on the team and starting to actually talk.
Okay, and I only heard tidbit.
Good, please do.
About
So have your
that.
email, I'm happy to send you the deck if you
Yeah,
want.
actually,
that
are you gonna send it to the folks
sort
out
of
here?
Yeah,
a-
so I'm just getting all the emails here.
commitment?
Okay.
What
Yeah,
is that?
generally,
Good.
the last
Such a
Wednesday
pleasure to
or
meet you,
Likewise,
Arnie.
likewise.
I feel like I've had.
6
Thank you
once
so
you're
much.
at 6:30
Come talk.
till we close.
Hi. Drink questions, by the way.
You come in and help set up, make sure all the chairs are here, make sure.
Oh, I'm gonna talk to this gentleman.
drinks
Are
are
you
ready.
looking for?
My job is to make sure the deck is ready.
Is that what you're doing now?
We don't always present on my machine, but
Yeah, okay, okay.
and also to check people in, right, we have an event right now, and
To track
my code people didn't show up today.
Uh,
One has the flu and the other one got pulled into a late night
It's a
traffic.
good thing you were here.
But that's why I also have to do things on paper sometimes.
Right, makes sense. Okay, well, I'll send you an email. My name's Amanda from this.
Very nice to meet you.
Okay, great, thank you. Good to meet you.
Yes.
Oh, really?
Hey,
That
it's
sounds
been, Ari, nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you, Ari.
I'm interested in joining as an event coordinator.
Okay,
What's the process?
send me an email.
Okay, how do I get
Bernard?
What's the time? So I said, I think I signed up online. Someone sent me an email for a meeting. I didn't know come back to my
different,
email
like,
yet.
the text might
Do I
tap
talk
out.
first?
So what I'm
Well,
thinking
yeah.
here is that
Talk to